This is Clarence Moye with AwardsDaily, welcoming a someone that needs no introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway. Sarah Paulson, Emmy winner for The People versus O.J. Simpson, American Crime Story, who is now was seen last fall in Netflix's Ratched. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you're doing well and staying safe and all
So
of
far,
that.
so far,
Excellent.
so good. I hope you as well.
Yes, thank you for asking.
Good.
So I wanted to start with a question that's going to lead into a different question, more specific to the series. But when you're looking at performances, when you're looking at a work that other actresses do you ever look at that and say, how would I do that? Would I do that differently? Do you put yourself in that role?
That's such an interesting question, and I don't think I've ever been asked that before. And the performances that I love the most are the ones where I think I, I wouldn't even know what she's doing is so extraordinary and feels
Mhm.
almost like touched by the gods in a way that I think about like Marianne Cotillard in La Vie en Rose, and it's like nobody, I don't care who you, Meryl Streep's a genius, but I don't think anybody could have done that more brilliantly than she did. And so
Right.
I don't often think when I see performances that are particularly moving to me or that strike
Mhm.
me in a way, I very rarely think, what would I do? I mostly think, let me write down what I think she's doing and try to steal it so that then everyone thinks that I've come up with something really great on my own. Because I am incredibly opinionated about performances in a way which I think sometimes is why I'm such a tough critic on myself because
Mhm.
I am so ungenerous
Mhm.
really, when I watch, certain work that sometimes things that are getting like a lot of attention, and I'm like, this is crap, which is a terrible way to be because I'm sure someone, could maybe just as easily say that about me at any given moment for anything I've done or will do. So I don't know why I do that, but I'm just like, probably because I'm so passionate about it that, or
Sure.
I'm very jealous of the actor getting to play the thing that I wish I could get my hands on. But
Right.
um, yeah, like that one performance that Claire Danes in Homeland is like the great role to me
Oh,
of all time, and
sure.
she was so brilliant in it. And there's not a world in which I could ever do a tenth of what she did on that series. But it's one of those ones where I'm like, oh, I'm jealous. I want that.
Right.
I want to be playing it.
So the reason I ask that is obviously you're taking on this role of Mildred Ratched, which was obviously an iconic role by Louise Fletcher in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So when you started taking on this project, how closely do you align yourself with maybe some things that she did versus is this all about making this your character and your performance and just remain agnostic of that performance?
I think at first I felt resistant
Mhm.
to watch the rewatch the movie. I had seen it years ago, but then I sort of felt like because it felt like it might be a little bit of self-imposed pressure I didn't want to put on myself, and our story obviously predates the story of the movie and the book. So I thought, how do I allow space for this to become my own? But then I sort of thought, oh, that's very selfish of you and also short-sighted because at the end of the day, the only reason we're even, daring to dip our toe into this backstory, our invented backstory, is because of what Louise Fletcher did with the part and how indelible her performance is to everyone who's ever seen that movie, which is arguably a great number of people. She won an Oscar for it. She took a role that, I'm sure you've read a lot about this, nobody in town wanted.
Right.
Nobody wanted to play someone unlikable or, perceived to be unsympathetic. And so I just thought, it was an incredibly brave thing for her to have done at a time when the climate was not sort of open to the idea of women, particularly playing an unlikable. I mean, not that we've moved that far down the road since then, but I thought I get to play this part because of what she did. I best get to watching it, and when I did, I had a totally what's the word a real shift in terms of what I thought about the performance in the moment versus what I had held, what my memory sort of told me, which is that I didn't see her as a villain at all, and
Mm.
I saw her sort of as a victim a patriarchal infrastructure that was that hospital, um, that sort of left her very little room to maneuver in any way other than what she did. You could argue someone with a greater compassion, or someone with access to her compassion, might have been able to sort of move around some of the parameters and boundaries that were set in that hospital. But to me, it was sort of more she was a victim of circumstance in a lot of ways. So it became very, very important, to answer your question in a very long-winded way, is that I thought it was really vitally important that I watch it, and vitally important that I try to hold some of her physicality in my mind as much as I could. We did do a thing midway through the season when my Nurse Ratched becomes head nurse. Louise Fletcher used to carry this giant ring of keys, and she would carry it in her hand sometimes, and sometimes in the therapy session she wore it on her bicep, probably so that no one could lurch forward and take her keys.
Sure.
So at the moment I sort of wear the crown of being head nurse, I asked the props department to find me a period correct ring of keys, and I wanted, in an homage to her, to
Oh, wow.
push the key ring all the way up there, and I would sometimes walk down the hallway with it there, as an idea that maybe she had done this prior to working at the hospital.
That's fantastic.
So little things like that, and it's a small thing, but I really mostly tried to remember how still she was, and how unafraid of stillness she was, which I think is you often as an actor get very tempted to, your this description in the script is she opens a carton of milk, and you think you have to like open it in a very interesting way, and it's like because you're being filmed, it automatically feels like it has to be special or something, as opposed to just the normal human behavior of opening a carton of milk. And so somehow, with Mildred's demeanor being so sort of faultless, you don't see any cracks in it, at least in Louise Fletcher's performance. I thought, what would happen if that was there and we learn why it was there, but we did see a little bit more of her insides, if she was a little bit more translucent, because the hope would be, as we go further into the series, you'll start to see a hardening and a shedding of certain things, and that would be my hope. Boy, I've been talking for a long time.
That's great. It's all fascinating. So, as you mentioned, actually, you answered my next three questions already. So you,
see, I'm talking about
no, so you have the stillness from Louise Fletcher. You have the text from the script. What else helped you find your way into who this character was?
Well, once we, and the thing about working in television, and it doesn't always happen this way, but it does in the Ryan world a lot, is that you're sort of, as you're going, you're getting the scripts. And so I didn't start with anything more than the first two when we started. So I didn't get to the backstory about her childhood with her brother until episode 6, when the audience, learns through the puppet theater what hardship she went through as a young girl. So I think, but prior to that, the main thing I thought about when playing her was that she was profoundly lonely, and that Mildred Ratched, our Mildred Ratched, was a person who was walking around with a tremendous amount of guilt for having forsaken her brother in a terrible moment of need for him. And she was going to do anything and everything in her power to right that wrong. Even if it meant, doing some really horrifying things along the way. And so I was trying to connect with the purity of that want, that sort of human need to want to make things right, even though this is a very extreme case of a kind of blindness to the harm caused to others in an effort to free herself, liberate herself from this terrible feeling of guilt. Of having abandoned the person that meant the most to her in the world, which was her brother.
Talking about her brother, which is played by Finn Wolfhard, you've worked with him before, mostly in American Horror Story. Did you have a starting point with him? Because clearly there's a connection you don't know about it in the first episode, or till, if I remember correctly, maybe the end of the first episode, that they are siblings. Did you rely on that sort of past experience with him, that past knowledge of him, to have that sort of it's almost like a conjoined backstory between the characters. There's a familiarity there that you can build off of.
It's interesting that you use the word conjoined because how we first worked together was when I was playing the conjoined twins
Right.
on
The Tatler twins.
yeah, the Tatler twins on Horror Story. Um, I first saw Finn in Death of a Salesman on Broadway. That was my introduction. It was a lot of people's introduction to Finn. And then I worked with him on season 4 Freak Show of American Horror Story. So, of course, anytime you have one of the very enormous blessings of which he has bestowed many upon me, Ryan, this camaraderie and fellowship that happens with this troupe of actors that he repeatedly uses, and therefore you have so much sort of symbiotic family history with these actors. And so this was one of those opportunities where Finn, I think, and my history together was absolutely fertile ground for us to do this other stuff and that kind of thing. I remember when Sandra Bullock asked me to play her sister in Bird Box, and it wasn't a large part, and she was like, she said, but I just feel our friendship and our time together on Oceans, like it will, because it has to be communicated, their relationship has to be communicated so quickly in such a short amount of time. I think it would be better if it's someone that I already have a rapport with. And I thought, that's really smart, because no matter how open you are as a performer, anytime you're first meeting, there's stories actors talk about, like shaking someone's hand and meeting them for the first time and then having a love scene with them. It's really hard to have this like insta intimacy, and yet actors tend to be quite good at it. But it's still, I think, always helpful when there is, when you have the luck of having real personal history that can inform things in a speedy way, so you can kind of get down to the marrow without as much work. It's really just a communication of my laziness. It's really what it is. It's just lazy enough to just be like, I already know him. It'd be great if he could be the brother, because then I don't have to work as hard, basically.
Right. But it's an odd relationship that you have to build, because you have to play it both. You are brother and sister, so there is a connection, but you also don't want to let people know that. So then you have to play a distance,
Yeah.
between him.
That's right. But I think because I was playing Mildred, she sitting at a remove is the way she survives. She can't let anyone too close, and she can't let anyone know she has real need. She sort of committed herself to not wanting or longing for anything, because I think it's just filled with too much disappointment. So she sort of girded herself and steeled herself from those basic human wants, which sort of makes it possible, I think, for her to keep Edmund at a distance when she needs to, all the while basically being the engine in her car in every way.
So you mentioned the puppet scene, or the marionette sequence, where there are the flashbacks, and it sort of explains the backstory behind Mildred and her brother. Talk to me about filming those sequences and preparing for that emotion. I mean, at one point you're just watching that, and then look at a tear streams down your face because all those memories are coming back. How did you get yourself to that point?
It's funny because sometimes, and this doesn't happen all the time, and God knows I've been in many situations where it hasn't, and it's always so much harder, and I don't want to make it seem like it didn't take effort on my part, but we were at that point in the middle of a six of 8 episodes, and so I'd been living with Mildred and as Mildred for many months, and it was easy is not the word. I didn't have to make an imaginative leap. My mind was, because basically when we shot it, Cynthia and I were sitting next to one another, cameras were on us, and what was happening behind the camera was the puppeteers trying to, but everyone else around me had to be laughing, because if they were on me, they were also on the people behind us, and they're seeing the real show, and I'm seeing what I'm seeing in my mind. And so a lot of it was my imagination, but because it was filled and the source of such pain for Mildred, and by that point I had had so many scenes with Finn as Edmund, and there was so much of that alive in me that it kind of just spilled out without me trying to make it so. It was just me looking at those puppets, and even there was just something about the way the puppet threw its body down on the ground and cried, and I just thought it just affected me in a way that now when I think about it, it does not in retrospect. But at the time, I was so deep in it that it just was devastating to me to watch. And um, yeah, and sometimes, believe me, I have to work very hard to get myself in a state of terror or sadness or something. But this was not one of those times, and it was simply because it came sort of to the smack end to the beginning of the smack in the middle to the beginning of the end of my time with Mildred, that it sort of informed itself. And I personally thought that it was a very interesting way for the audience to be given the backstory without a sort of traditional flashback. And I thought it was sort of cleverly done. That, when I read it, I thought, oh, what an interesting way to give the audience this very troubling information. The juxtaposition of everyone laughing and thinking they're watching a particular story, and having Mildred go down. And I think by that point, the audience is really ready to kind of understand what Mildred's problem is, really. It's like,
Yeah.
what's going on with her,
It's a very memorable sequence. The juxtaposition of the personal trauma with everybody laughing around. It's unmistakable. It's very memorable. Um, you've obviously played a great deal of strong women, women who are growing into their strength. Um, what about Mildred Ratched was a challenge for you? Why is this role different for you from others that you've done?
Well, first of all, I've never played a titular character before in this way, and there was a certain pressure I felt, um, that I was having this first journey out into the world, not as part of an ensemble on American Horror
Mm.
Story. Even if I was playing the heroine of a particular season, I've always said that Horror Story is the star of Horror Story. American Horror
Right.
Story, the franchise, is the thing. And so no matter what character you're playing, you are part of a fabric of a larger thing. Doesn't matter how much screen time you have, really. But this is a show called Ratched, and my name is Mildred Ratched. And so it felt like a lot of pressure, and something that I also felt simultaneously that I was ready for, and also terrified by. And I've said things like this before, that I like to be scared, and I don't mean scared of something jumping out at me, although I am scared of that too. But I mean, I like to feel the terror of, I don't know that I'm going to be able to do this. And
Right.
I felt it with Marcia Clark, and I felt it with various characters on Horror Story, and I certainly felt it with this. I was like, I think Kate Winslet might have been a better choice for this, Ryan. And he was like, oh, he was very, very kind to me about it. But it was scary because, if it works, great. If it doesn't, I worried about the industry, thought that I couldn't carry a thing, that, oh, I'm a wonderful addition to an ensemble, and that's where I should stay. Was my fear that it would sort of be revealed that I couldn't kind of take the torch to the last end of the Olympic run to light the thing. Like,
Yeah.
it was just, not to equate my playing Mildred Ratched with being a torchbearer, but I
No, but I
just,
know what you mean.
you know
I
what
know
I
what you
mean.
mean. That. Mhm.
It from an industry standpoint, I think I felt very aware of the opportunity that I was having, and that what it meant if I did this movie for Netflix called Run. That no, not sorry, not for Netflix. It's on
Hulu.
Netflix now, but it was on Hulu. But then I think it's on Netflix now, as far as I understand. But yeah, on Hulu. And it was supposed to be out in the theaters, and I remember being so relieved when it wasn't going to be, because it was my first time also in a film space
Mm.
starring in a movie, and I felt totally terrified. And I feel like so often, you live and die by your perceived success. Whether the thing was good or not doesn't seem to matter. What matters is how many people watched it, how much money was made, and that kind of when that's the governing principle to determine a success, it can feel like a lot of internalized pressure for someone like me. I thought, I have this opportunity, and I don't want to blow it, and I don't want to, like, have some example of proving to, studio heads and other producers that I'm not bankable or whatever that nonsense is, but is a very real component to our business. And so, and then it was wonderfully successful on Hulu, which was so thrilling and a great relief to me. But and a lot of people watch Ratchet too, and that was also a great relief to me, and a point of pride, because I got to executive produce it, and that was a new foray for me, and so it was all a jumble of a lot of things, but it was scary for me because when you drive down Sunset and it's really cool to see a billboard of your face on it, but then it's also like, that's my face, and if this thing doesn't work, that's my face, and the equation of that face with that show and it not working, no one watching it would feel personal, and would, it's like worrying about how many dings you get on your armor and hoping they're going to continue to let you participate. It's like,
Right.
and that's just how the business works sometimes. So it was scary for me.
Well, hopefully you have alleviated those fears because it was wildly successful and you were fantastic carrying the whole thing on your shoulders with the cat. You had a lot of,
I
there
mean,
was
we want to
fantastic
talk
supporting
about
cast.
Davis, or you want to talk about
Yeah.
Sophie? Like, there's
Right.
just some performances, Cynthia Sharon, everybody, Finn. I mean, I don't mean to leave John and all the boys out, but Amanda
Right.
Plummer. I feel like people aren't talking about Amanda Plummer enough. I think she's so special on the show, and
Mhm.
I just was, constantly going, well, if I'm going to be any good on this thing, it will be because of the people that I'm around. They
Right.
just, every single one of them is so extraordinary and just makes everyone better. So I got very lucky, and Ryan was very smart to just stack the deck with as many gifted people as possible.
Excellent. So I'd like to close with sort of what is the future state of Ratchet. Like, I know we were in the middle
Oh,
of the pandemic here. What's that second season? When can we look forward to that?
that's a very good question, Clarence. I know we're doing a second season, but my brother is now going to be the Green Lantern. I think Finn is going to be on
Yes.
doing something, and as soon as I saw the announcement, I was like, oh, okay, we won't be shooting for just a little second. He's got to go do that before we can.
He's got to be a superhero now.
Gotta be a superhero, and so like who knows if we'll ever get him back. So I know we're doing it. I don't know when. Ryan has told me little ideas. I mean, the goal had been, I think he had said in his fantasy, it would be 4 years, 4 seasons, and the end season would end at the point when she was working in the Cuckoo's Nest Hospital.
Ah,
Um, but perhaps we would never enter the hospital. It would be,
okay.
you would see her. I don't know about you, but I'm not interested in seeing someone pretend to be the chief or to pretend to be Jack Nicholson. Like, I don't think
No.
or Billy Bobbitt. Like, I don't want any of that. Don't want
Right.
any of that. But it would be interesting because I did when I watched the movie. I thought, where does she go home to at night? What is her
Hmm.
life like? What is her life? And that would be sort of an interesting thing to hear about her workday. Like, what if you saw, a very famous scene from the movie where, he grabs her by the throat and pushes her up against the wall, and she comes home and tells Gwendolyn that happened, and whatever. I mean, there's a myriad of ways that could sort of resolve itself. But I don't know if that's really where his head is. That was early days when we hadn't even shot the thing yet. So
Okay.
your guess is as good as mine, but I will be sure to let you know as soon as I
Excellent.
know.
Well, I look
Okay.
forward to it very much.
I really
Well,
appreciate
Sarah
that.
Paulson, thank you so much. Thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation. Stay safe, and again, give Holland my best.
I surely will. Everyone loves Holland more than me. This is just the way it is.
That is not true. I'm a
It's
huge
true.
fan of
I
both of you.
I can live with it because that's how it should be.
Well, the last time I talked with Holland, I said, give Sarah my best. So there you
Okay.
go.
She didn't say anything quippy right back to you. She just took it like a
Okay.
classy lady. The other difference between the two of us.
All right. Well, you take
All right.
care.
Thank you so
Bye
much.
bye.
Have a good one.
You
Bye.
too. Bye bye.